Soldier Mage King, Chapter 7, The Dragon's Call. Arthur Pendragon was going to drive his father to an early grave. Uther had decided it, not through the blade of a sword, but through sheer bloody stubbornness. He had a very annoying tendency, one that had Uther meeting with the steward every week without fail. It seemed that the only thing resembling a servant that Arthur could put up with for more than a week was his squire Galahad. But Galahad was a noble's son, and had duties beyond doing all of the chores that surrounded the prince. Uther had not expected an assassination attempt by a witch wearing Lady Helen's face, nor that Gaius's new apprentice, a girl maybe a year younger than Arthur, with long raven hair, pale skin, and a surprisingly beautiful face for a commoner, would bodily pull Arthur out of the way of the blade. Both of them tumbled to the floor as Morgana screamed, the knife buried itself near to the hilt in the place where Arthur's heart would have been a moment before. The witch slumped to the floor, her last breath stuttering out of her. The chandelier had fallen on top of her. Uther scrambled around Arthur's ruined seat as his son pulled himself back to his feet, the girl who'd saved him still in a heap on the floor. Arthur blinked at her a few times before remembering his decorum and pulling her to her feet. She squeaked, though Uther couldn't tell if it was in pain or surprise. "You saved my life." Arthur sounded more confused than grateful. Uther stepped forward and took the girl's hand. She stiffened, eyes fixed on the floor, clearly uncomfortable with this much attention. "This merits quite the reward," Uther said, glancing at Arthur. He could kill two birds with one stone here, reward the girl, and fix the issue the steward had of running out of servants who could keep up with Arthur, at least for a while. "You shall be Prince Arthur's maidservant." "Father!" Arthur began to protest as the court burst into applause. Uther released the girl's hand and turned to him, a single look enough to quell the prince's protests. To his credit, Arthur waited until they were alone to complain about this new situation. "The girl saved your life, Arthur. Loyalty to the crown, to that degree, must be rewarded. I do not expect it to be a permanent situation. You have a tendency to frighten off servants within the week. She's also Gaius's new apprentice, so at the very least she may be of use teaching the knights some battle medicine. Gaius has said that has been lacking lately." Uther quite liked his solution, though Arthur still looked incensed. Honestly, Uther didn't expect this slip of a girl to last a week. She would go running to the steward, begging to either leave her position or claim, possibly rightly so, that her position with Gaius would be more useful. But the girl hung around until the sight of her was just as common as the sight of Morgana's maid at her side. At first, Uther assumed Arthur kept her around because she was pretty. She did have a certain ethereal air about her, even dressing as she did in simple, plain brown skirts and corsets, the only splash of color her faded red and blue tunics with interchanging scarves she wore knotted around her neck. But watching them interact from his window as they made their way to some appointment or another, Uther couldn't help but put the thought of Arthur betting and leaving the girl out of his mind. For one, it just wasn't who his son was. When he was younger, he'd loved stories of chivalry and true love. He couldn't see Arthur looking for a simple roll in the hay, but that put their relationship in a new light. Arthur had made a friend. Seemingly one as close as Morgana and her servant. He'd never begrudged Morgana her friend. But for Arthur, who was to someday rule, this sort of thing could be dangerous. The girl could turn traitor and stab him in the back before he could ever see it coming, as Nimue had done to him. But as the years passed, Uther began to realize that he had mistaken the relationship. She was not his Nimue. She was Arthur's Igraine. Despite everything, she stayed by him and proved her loyalty over and over, directly to Arthur, though never directly to Uther. He didn't even mind. He was somewhat comforted that Arthur had her by his side, though he never saw their relationship move past looks of longing when backs were turned. If that was due to Arthur's duty to Camelot, to one day marry a noblewoman, or something else, Uther didn't know. But Arthur, though more inclined to disagree with him, was growing into a good man. Uther often suspected that was at least in part because of Merlin. It took him almost 2 years to learn her name. But she'd He'd never expected her to stick around, much less juggle her duties as physician's apprentice and Arthur's maidservant. When he noticed her, he was slightly intrigued. She had not been raised in Camelot, but her loyalty to Arthur was absolute. Loyalty through love was a precious thing, and though Uther could not point it out, since that might be the only thing keeping Arthur from falling for the girl as well, he hoped Arthur knew to cherish that.